Hey everyone, I'm Mike Black, and this is the Page Black Leadership. I was to say series, but I almost said podcast, but we're turning this into a podcast. So I'm out here every single Thursday, and every Thursday, what I do is I bring in experts to talk about solutions to challenges that business leaders in the middle market face. Today, we've spent this entire month on the Great Resignation. We've talked about HR, some HR solutions for this, some training solutions for this. And today we're going to be talking about business culture and how better business culture can help you. So let me get you started here with a little bit of data as we're moving forward. Between April, oops, I hit the wrong button there. Let me come back out. Between April and September of last year, 24 million people left their jobs. Some of this, I looked into some of this data. This was MIT Sloan put this article out, and some of this was driven by the industry. So that was one of the factors. Obviously, retail had some differences with other industries, but the top predictor was toxic culture. So we're really going to dig into toxic culture today. Other issues were job insecurity and failure to recognize employee performance, which sounds a little bit toxic to me. But my guest today, I'm going to introduce him. Let me get my slides going here. We have Jim Bishop with us today. Jim has worked in corporate leadership for 2 decades. He founded Conjunction Leadership, where he works with companies of all sizes, and he really wants to work with them to help improve their culture. His approach is a blend of science and art, and he emphasizes the value of the whole person, not just how people show up at work, which I think is really critical for companies that are struggling with attrition today. All right. He's a sought-after thought leader. He works on creating a more optimal employee and thus a more optimal customer experience, because we all know that the way you treat your employees is the way they treat your customers. And if you didn't know that, that's absolutely the truth. So let's get started with Jim today. Excuse me. I have to introduce myself. I guess I'm on the screen twice here. My name is Mike Black. I'm the CEO and managing partner of Page Black. Enough said. Let's get started with our first question. And that really is, I think that toxic culture, I think it can be overused. It's easy to say, I'm not happy at work. What is it's toxic. Let's talk about, what does that really mean? What is a toxic culture? What does it mean? I'll throw this on the screen just so you can read it if you're watching this and you're not, you don't have audio on for whatever reason. So we're going to start with toxic culture. Jim, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Mike. Thanks for inviting me on again today. It's always a good joy to be back and kind of bring this topic back to the conversation. I think as we were chatting before, I just want it's become, before when we did this, maybe a couple months ago, people were thinking, what is this thing called the Great Resignation? Is it even real? There was some skepticism. I think it's finally settled in long enough that people believe it, right? And the latest research, now that we're able to kind of dice it and get it out there and see what it looks like and why people are leaving, really shed some light onto what is going on, right? If we just kind of put it in cultural context, the world shifted. The pandemic caused us to think a little deeper, what we were looking at, what our values, where we were aligned, where we weren't. And it gave us the chance to experience what life and work look like together. And I think even fast forward that now, 2 years into the pandemic, and some might say we're almost a year into this thing called the Great Resignation, we have data that suggests that it's not just about the employee, it's about the culture of the organization and that employee's well-being in that culture, right? And you've alluded to some of that data, what it is, what it isn't, where it's at. But one thing that questions that people have also said, is this a blue collar thing? Are we seeing it more in the trades? Are we seeing it more in people who are hourly paid versus people who are on salary? And the data suggests it's pretty much universal across different places. Management consulting, as an example, is the second highest rate of turnover out there right now. So those are traditionally very well paid jobs, very sought after positions, and yet people are saying, I'm not going to take it anymore and do this either. So if we dive deeper into it, that question on what is a toxic culture, I think is a really important one. So maybe the place to start is, what is a toxic culture not? And then we'll end up in where it's at. But there's a lot of things that I hear, even in my coaching practice, from individual clients, and they have a beef about what's going on in the workplace. Maybe they've been passed up for a promotion. Maybe their boss doesn't treat them quite as well as they would like them to, or maybe they have coworkers that gossip behind their backs, right? And in and of themselves, those things can be hurtful. They can probably be somewhat damaging to relationships. But I would dare say that they're probably not what is causing the toxic culture. Right? There's symptoms of it, and there are probably artifacts of it, but something deeper is going on in that organization to say this is really what's causing it. So if we step back, I think toxic really is anything that's poisonous, right? And what's become poisonous is things that have been normalized over time, just accepted as the given way of doing business. For quite a long time in some of these businesses, hustle and grind were the things that were normalized, right? The things that you might have heard were people using their airline miles as a badge of honor. You know, some people, the 100,000 mile club, wearing that as a badge of honor, saying I've traveled this much in the last year, and other people in the organization celebrating that, or almost competing over things like that, right? That kind of environment where people are just burning themselves out for the sake of the organization without consistency around what does it take to make me whole in this environment. I think that's what causes it to be toxic. The other thing is when a lot of organizations, by belief, they may say that they value people, and they may even say that we value people over our profits. But when you get down to it, there are a lot of organizations who really still wrestle with that. That profit comes above people in almost all situations. And I think when we dig down deep, that's really the root cause of some of these things is where have we placed our priority as an organization? Maybe it's on shareholder return. Maybe it's on, the dollar at all costs. And as a result, if we chase those things, then what happens is, not that they're wrong in and of themselves, many businesses do need to make a profit, right? But if that's what's held up as exclusive and that's the value of success, then people are going to gravitate towards doing that. And without a lot of own individual boundaries in their life, they can find themselves becoming victim to a toxic culture themselves, right? So I guess that's probably what I would say is that toxicity is the things that people get annoyed with are symptoms. The root causes of toxicity are generally much deeper than that, something that you have to dig a little bit further. So,
right. So if you're working with actually really quickly before, if you have questions, type them into the chat of the event and we will try our best to answer them. And if you are listening, please like or share this because I think Jim has some great content, some great ideas, and we'd love to expose more people to what he has to say. So Jim, if you're a business and, obviously return on value for shareholders is an important metric. At the same time, you need to look at how are you treating people? How do you help companies balance that? Like, what are the conversations that you have to have of looking at that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's, again, so the name of my organization is Conjunction Leadership because I really do believe in the and, right? I do believe that you can't hold things mutually exclusive and expect that you're going to get the best results. So shareholder return, yeah, profit, however you want to manage that, yes, that's important. It's not exclusive. There's also an and, right? So if you, as an example, we could get a lot more profit in our businesses, but at the same time, we're probably depleting the Earth's natural resources and we're probably also doing some harm, right? Those two things can't be put in opposition with one another. Sometimes the and needs to be there to say it's profits and our environmental responsibility, or it's profits and people, right? Where organizations get in trouble is when the trade-off comes, which one do they choose, right? And that is often where the values judgment comes into place for most people who are working in the organization, because as people, as humans, we have values. And those values need to align in order for us to feel like we can really bring our full self to work. If the organization is consistently choosing one of those things over another, it may not align with our values. And it may also be contradictory to our values. It may cause some behaviors that I don't personally want to engage in or don't feel comfortable with. That may be just working extra hours, being called in for emergencies all the time when a lack of planning has caused us to get into an emergent situation. In a lot of cases, I think it is just the way of working that we've normalized. Heavy bureaucracy, a lot of top-down decisions, leaders at the top who have congregated power and who don't know who aren't comfortable with decentralizing power and passing it to the edges of the organization. Some of those types of things right now are what people are citing as a cause for toxic cultures, right? Bosses who are tone deaf, bosses who don't necessarily want to distribute power, bosses who don't know how to develop individuals. They only know how to manage situations. And all of those kind of things, really, when it comes down to it, the person's assessment of the organization is first and foremost with their frontline leader. Who do they report to? So,
right. That's the saying of people leave bosses, not companies. I think is very true there. And I think one of the ways to look at this, if you're a business leader, this is my opinion, but I think take a step back and don't look at the specifics. Look at the 30,000 foot view of this, that if you are asking, and I actually give an example, in 2019, I had to fire our second biggest customer. We were doing a lot of business with them, but every interaction, the team was really stressed out because they weren't pleasant. They had, they were, I don't know if they were toxic or not, but they were not pleasant to work with. And so it added so much burden to the team that my team was starting to complain, and I just had to cut it. And everything got pushed around. There was just a lot of work around that. So I had to let that go, even though, it was a painful decision. I think if I took that 30,000 foot view, it was either lose the organization or fire this client. It was pretty easy once I looked at that and said, okay, this is the direction we have to go. I mean, it's not like we didn't, for the record, folks, it's not like we didn't try. I got involved and started managing the projects just to make sure it wasn't us. So anyways, let's briefly move forward. Again, folks, if you have questions, please enter them into chat. We should see them here. I think I've seen them in the past. And if you don't, that's okay. Just keep listening. Let's move in briefly before we move forward. I want to talk a little bit about marketing in today's business landscape. It really should be communication, actually, because our company does three things. We build custom marketing plans for middle market companies. So these are companies that have tried lots of different approaches to marketing, and for whatever reason, they're just not working. We come in and actually do a real thorough analysis of where they are, where they want to go, and we build a plan to get them there. Secondary, we help is if they have a sales pipeline that they're just not closing the deals that they think they should. Maybe they don't know why. So maybe they're winning half the deals that they feel like they're really competitive on, but they're losing half, and the half that they're losing is really important. We'll actually go in and interview the people they've lost those deals with, the people they've won those deal with, and build a plan to get more of those deals in the one category. Finally, last thing we talk about, one of the reasons we're spending a lot of time on HR is internal communication. So we look at what's important in the culture. How do we communicate that with stories? How do we communicate those right pieces of that? We don't do cultural consulting. You'd have to talk to Jim for that, but we will do the communication aspect of that, and we'll help you write better job ads and things like that. So if that's of interest, please give us a shout. All right, let's get into our next question. Let me pop it on the screen for you. Jim, I just want to start, if we spotted this, culture isn't going to be something you can just it's not going to be, even in a smaller company, you can't fix that overnight. That's going to take time and conversation and some difficult conversations, but companies have problems today. What can they do today to get moving in the right direction if they're losing their team?
Yeah. So, I mean, the premise is that they're losing their team, right? So when they see turnover starting to happen, certainly, you have a problem. But what that also indicates is you were way too late to the game. Right. So the leaders are usually the last to recognize the problem. The front line is usually the first to know, right? The people who are doing the work understand what's going on well before they leave. And many organizations probably have a lot of employees who choose to quit and stay, right? They're not going to bring their best self to work. They're probably not going to give you their highest amount of engagement. But they may not want to go out and look for something else right now either, maybe family situations or whatever presented. So when they know they have a problem, is too late. And if they can start diagnosing what is going on before they even get there, it all comes down to how well is that leader able to know their people and build that trust and get on the inside of the story. Power dynamics in organizations often disrupt all of that, because sometimes individuals don't want to tell their boss what's really going on or what they really feel, or sometimes bosses haven't necessarily made it a safe spot for individuals to hear that, right? But let's put all that aside and assume that you are on the inside. You're one of those that really understand we have a problem and people are burning themselves out here, right? I always tell people the first thing to do is stop and acknowledge the emotion, right? If we were going to take that acronym of AND, again, for my business model, AND is attend to the emotions. Understand what you feel and understand what other people are feeling. And I think in today's world, there's a thing that some of the psychological research is indicating now. We have a thing called compassion fatigue, right? We're just so tired of having to care about everything that some people have stopped caring about anything, including what's happening on the inside of them. So if I don't understand my own emotion, I'm not likely to recognize it in someone else's. So the first thing that people can do is stop and attend to the emotion. Letter number 2, N, is just notice the tensions that it's creating. If there are people if you or others are feeling some of these negative emotions, right? What is the tension that creates? The productivity factor versus your emotional factor, right? Once you notice that, then the D of AND is to disrupt. you can disrupt all of that by saying, I've got to learn something new. And that's really where the birthplace of all new changes happen, is when someone finally gets to the place of saying, I need to do something new. I need to do something different. The worst thing that people can do when they recognize this is to just put more stuff in the system, right? And I see this a lot. Organizations want to buy employees greater benefits. They want to give them pool tables in the office. They want to do all kinds of stuff to make it a more fun place to work. And really, that just puts a greater incongruence, because if the behaviors of the organization are we hustle and grind and burn people out, but here's a pool table, every time I walk past that pool table, I'm thinking, yeah, whatever, right? So I would never suggest that someone start there. It starts with the individual and with the organization saying, what's the emotional climate that we're creating, and how are people feeling?
Why do you think people want to start there?
To start with
pool tables and kegs or whatever it is that you're going to put in the office.
Yeah, because it's a fun way for us to seem youthful, energizing, maybe even attract a different type of employee than we've attracted in the past, right? Other people are doing it, and candidly, it's easier to buy something than it is to change something, right? A personal behavior is always harder to change than it is adding a creature comfort to the workplace. I mean, that's a personal opinion, but I think a lot of people will default to what is easy, not what is hard. What's the best return? So
I think you're absolutely on track. Like looking in the mirror and going, I'm the problem, or I'm at least I'm a part of the problem, or I've done these things that are hurting the organization, making my life harder and my team's life harder, is really challenging as a leader. That's probably the number one test, in my view, of good leadership, is can you look in the mirror and go, you know what, I blew this. And number two would be, can you own it to your team? Not easy stuff, but definitely worthwhile. So what are some other, those are really good, I believe, kind of, I don't want to say emotional, because that's well, it really is this kind of emotional look at things and right on target. What are there some tactical solutions that are, obviously we want to definitely deal with the emotional side of this, but what are some tactical solutions that kind of are more immediate that we could look at?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think if we start with what is the definition of culture, then people can start building it out from there, right? A little bit. And I'm a big fan of Seth Godin. I love his work. He probably has a very simple, easy definition of culture. It's just people like us doing things like this, right? And so it again starts with that personal belief. Like, if people like us, and I'm setting the climate of my team or the organization that I'm working in, what do I do? What am I doing that's creating that? So the looking in the mirror can't be overlooked. And I know a lot of people will sometimes dismiss that as soft and fuzzy, and they want to jump to something quick and tactical. But I think that can't be overlooked in this space here of where we're at, because if you can do it for yourself, you'll do it for others. I give people kind of a mnemonic to diagnose where they're at relative to culture. So I think this is probably another nugget that people can take away, is if you're looking to build an ideal culture, right? You can go out and you can put words on plaques and you can put mission statements together, and that's certainly not a bad thing to do. But unless your behaviors match, you're not going to get there. So the three C's, the 3C model, I'd say, is your diagnostic. And the theory of human motivation, right, is that people are most intrinsically motivated by three things. One is their choice. They have personal autonomy over the majority of decisions. So if you look at your culture and say, where in this situation are we allowing our employees to have the maximum amount of choice? Can we give them more choice in some of this? Can we give them choice on what they work on, or how they work, or where they work, or how long they work, right? If you can offer more choices, an individual will feel more engaged. The second C is around competence, right? And as an individual, we all want to learn and grow. And the data will suggest that too. Even what's happening behind the Great Resignation is, I'm leaving because this organization doesn't believe in or doesn't espouse development. And so having rotation job assignments, or even having, if you break our work down, again, archaic ways of working, when we have hierarchies and structures and job descriptions, instead of just defining the work and allowing the team to flow to where the work needs to be done, if we try to bust apart some of the ways of working and we allow people greater opportunities to gain competence in their jobs, what they're also going to feel is, I'm constantly growing and learning as an individual. And the third C is around connection. And connection is for them to feel greater connection to individuals in their organization, outside of their organization, and to their organization, right? So if I feel connected to my peers that I'm working with, and our work is interdependent with one another, my output influences your input, then we're going to feel a greater sense of connection to what we're working on. Then if we can get greater connected to the people outside of our organization, ideally the customers or the problems that we're trying to solve in the world, right? Then they're going to have a greater feeling that my work matters, that there's a situation out there that's bigger than myself, and every day that I do something, I see it helping someone else. And then the third part of that is if they feel more connected to their organization, then I feel like I make a difference for you, Mike, when I work with you. Therefore, I feel like working for Page Black is a really good thing. So choice, competence, and connection are the diagnostics that I usually offer to people to say, like, where in this can you offer more to your employees without adding anything? You're just changing behaviors, and you're changing the way that people like us do things like this.
So if I'm I don't know what the word would be, skeptical CEO, I personally believe what you're saying, but if I were skeptical, one of the things I would say, I actually had a conversation, somebody emailed me after our panel and said, this is great. What do I do? Because I can't get my team to do whatever this, and I'm worried I'm going to go out of business because I have to increase rates and all of these things. And he's going to say, if I said these three things to him, and I said, what about, confidence? People want to grow. And, I've heard him specifically say this. So this is why I'm bringing this up, is his belief is his team doesn't want to grow. That, there are people there that just, that's not their thing. They're just showing up. They're not interested in growing. And you said everybody wants to grow. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I guess not knowing the individual specifically,
sure.
But if I'm a leader of an organization and I have that belief, then I'm probably also going to treat people like that, right? So our behaviors generally follow our belief. And so I would really sit there and think really hard if that belief is true, but try to validate it with a few individuals. Even with some exit interviews of people who have just recently chosen to leave, asking them the question if they felt like they had a chance to grow and learn here. And if they did, would that matter, right? That's going to take a very emotionally intelligent CEO or leader to be able to ask those questions, because sometimes you're going to get answers that you don't expect. But just hearing that, I would really question whether or not the belief is forming the behaviors that are also engendering a culture that says, hey, at this organization, you're not allowed to grow, or we don't expect you to grow.
Yeah, I suspect there are people out there that don't really want to take on that. Like, growth is hard. Even what you just described, that CEO that I'm talking about, who, by the way, is a warm, caring man. So I know he does care. Now, whether or not I've not worked for him. That's a totally different relationship. I have no idea if he's essentially a self-fulfilling prophecy. But I also think there probably are people who are that's just not their thing. They don't want to grow. They kind of want to be comfortable and safe. And that's not the world we live in these days. And so I imagine it's a struggle. And so then if he has his opinion, I guess my challenge to him would be is you challenge yourself to challenge your team. One, you have to grow yourself. And if you're not willing to take this on and hear things that you don't want to hear, then probably you're going to continue to do what you're doing, and you're probably going to stay in the same spot. But two, you need to challenge your team to grow and see what they do. Give them the opportunity rather than just assume they're not going to.
A lot of employees will probably not overtly say, look, I need more responsibility, right? They may, and there are certainly a lot that do, but it may have been an ingrained belief or behavior for many generations in this work environment that it's just not a place that you ask that question. Yet, I also would espouse that many employees do at least once a year say, I would like a little more money, right? At least once a year during their annual review process, or if an organization has that, or a conversation with the boss, or even over a beer with a friend, are probably saying, hey, at least I like a little more money to continue to do this job. Well, we all know that more money isn't just willingly doled out. It's also generally a merit-based situation based upon how well you've performed, or how aggressive you are, or how much more responsibility you're willing to take, right? When an employer hears, I need more money, a lot of times what they're going to do is think the problem is in their compensation system, right? That's an easy fix, because we could change our compensation system, or we can hand out more bonuses, or we could at least give you more in-kind type of benefits, right? The more difficult situation is to say, let's grow employees' mindset so that they're willing to take more responsibility and earn more by doing so, right? That is a whole different situation. And when people ask me, like, what do you do in your job? I often tell them it's in the world of HR, but it's not necessarily HR, benefits and payroll. That's what people think a lot of the problems are. It's over here in this space that's softer, relational ways of working, and helping people bust down their hierarchies and the way that we've traditionally organized businesses, so that we can reorganize our work, help people find their best self, help people come to life, and really live out the two beliefs of our organization. That first belief is that we believe everybody deserves to be a better human through the work that they do. And the second one that's coupled very closely with that is that we believe that every leader has to go first in that equation. If I want to get more, I have to become a better employee, a better human in my work as well. So,
yeah. And I'll say that he did specifically talk about, how do I link revenue? How do I grow in order to pay them more? And that's a really good symptom of what you just described. So I'm going to forward him this and suggest that this might be helpful to him.
Yeah. I mean, every organization wants to grow, right? That's the business of organizations in general, is to earn more, do more, have greater impact, whatever their purpose is. But in order for us to grow, even the sign behind me, the first thing you have to do is disrupt, then you bridge, and then you grow, right? So, most people are not comfortable with that disruptive phase of learning something new or unlearning the behavior that they've already learned, or a mindset that they've held for a very long time. So I think that's the space where I believe, in my second belief there, that a leader has to go first. In our model, at least, of helping organizations, we start with that leader and then we move to the organization, because very few things are going to change in an organization unless a leader is willing to disrupt, bridge, and grow themselves.
All right. I'm going to go backwards in our thing today, because I have another question for you. As you presented, one of the things that struck me is you were talking about what toxic cultures and what that looks like. And I was like, gosh, I really think to some degree, a toxic culture is what we tolerate. Like, if you want to see if you have a toxic culture, what is it that you tolerate within your organization? And frankly, that's both for employees as well as leaders. If you're tolerating things that are either immoral or whatever it might be. I mean, obviously immoral is farther out there, but even just disrespectful or whatever, or even like you talked about, where there's a culture where they're just on the hustle culture where we work ourselves to death, which I'm actually officially off of that line. I'm not working myself to death anymore. I've done that for a long time. I'm not. But anyways, what are your thoughts about that as a definition of or ability as looking at what you're willing to tolerate as a way to gauge how toxic your culture is?
Yeah, I mean, generally, the way culture is, the artifact of culture, at least, is the things that we tolerate and the things that we allow, right? It doesn't matter what the brass plaque is. It doesn't matter what 3 words we put as our core values, if what we do is completely different than that, right? So, and I love the fact that you also said it for individuals as well as organizations, because I think an individual also holds responsibility in creating a culture, in being part of a culture, right? And we also there's plenty of anecdotes and examples of leaders that I've worked with over time who, because they've chosen to do something different, they have created a microculture, which has ignited a grass fire and changed a corporate culture, right? Teams, as an example, a leader who says, I don't want to have to make all the decisions anymore. I had a leader I was working with, and he came to me completely exhausted at one point, and he was really, really tired. And I said, what's going on? And he said, I'm constantly splitting the baby. And in that case, he's using the biblical example of Solomon and saying, people bring me decisions every day, and I need to split the baby in that decision and make it and tell people what to do. And it was burning him out. And I said, why is it burning you out? And his statement back was, because I'm tired of having to have so many people not agree with my decisions, right? Well, there's a lot of stuff behind that, right? One is maybe a lack of boundaries. Do they need to agree with your decisions? But 2, do you really need to be making the decision? And that was the question I posed to him: is, are there other people more capable of making this decision than you? And he said, well, yeah, actually the people who brought the decision to me in the first place. And I said, then what prevents you from turning the decision back to them? And it was a lot of this kind of ingrained belief that a strong leader makes strong decisions. And unless I make strong decisions, I might be labeled as a weak leader. But over time, what happened with this leader was he chose to start pushing those decisions down. He chose to start decentralizing some of the power that he had congregated. And guess what he got to do? He actually got to lead. He got to be more caring, more empathetic, more concerned about what was happening in the organization. And he was less concerned with managing and controlling all the decisions that were going on. So I think that's just an illustration of some of this, where it can be because of a belief that I hold. And if I'm willing to disrupt that, I can assert greater boundaries in my own life. I can assert greater opinions and things that I want to do. And I can change the culture of this team ultimately what can happen is that can spread to an organization pretty easily too. When people say, gee, how did you actually get to lead instead of manage?
Great answer. We're going to end it there. Actually, I can't think of a better one. My only thought for people as I listen to that is that when the decision doesn't go right, be careful how you handle that you still have to own that piece of it. People will make mistakes.
Yeah.
And so how you handle that's important as well, because they won't continue to make decisions if you just completely destroy them when they blow it. And we all blow it. At least I do all the time. All right, really quick, folks, before we head out, we'll get into it. Next week, we are shifting topics and we're going back into the sales and marketing arena. We have Jim Franklin, we have Mike Bowers, and Keziah von Stollen. I'm saying the German way to say that. I apologize, Keziah. We're going to talk about revenue enablement. What is that? How does it work in 2022? And how can that help you with your business? Everybody have a great week. We'll see you next week.